It's not enough just to look at the cult in eyes wide shut, in isolation. To understand the cult and what is going to happen to Helena, we have to understand it in relation to where this cult actually derives from. And it is derived from Babylon.
What do you think we should do?
What do I think we should do?
Look, Mommy.
Now this symbol right here, combined with the upside down pentagram, is a biblical symbol, Babylon the Great, known as the Mother of Whores. The symbol is a woman dressed in purple and scarlet, riding a beast. Now this image is a derogative Israelian perspective on Ishtar, the goddess of the Babylonian Empire. That is what is being evoked here with this scarlet-dressed Barbie standing at top of the beast symbol. The 8-pointed staff Ishtar and the pentagram is one of the same symbols.
Victor!
This is the symbol of Inanna, of Ishtar, the goddess of ancient Babylon. She was goddess of war and sex. And the priestesses in the temples of Babylon essentially personified Ishtar, right? And the reason why it has 8 points is because every 8 Earth years, Venus performs a 5-petaled loop that joins together, forms a rose. And when you connect the 5 sort of petals of this rose, you get the pentagram. The 5th point in the pentagram represents spirit. So when it's pointing upwards, spirit is risen, if you will. When it's pointing downwards, spirit is fallen. So with this symbol, we sort of track the fall of Lucifer, right? When it's pointing upwards, we have Lucifer in heaven as a bright, beautiful, wise being that they were prior to the fall. As we see here, Alice is leading Bill and the daughter down this aisle where we saw the Italian goon go, right? The Italian guy, he walked on the other side of the aisle. So he's down there on the other side of the aisle waiting for Helena. Meanwhile, we have these 2 old men who are part of the cult. And they're going to take Helena, and Alice is the one handing her over. And we see that here. She looks back at Bill one last time, and that's the last time we see Helena. So what is going to happen to Helena? Sometimes to foresee the future, we have to go back in the past. And in this case, we have to go back to the soil from which this symbol derives. In ancient Babylon, we had the goddess temples, right? The Ishtar temples. And in these Ishtar temples, we had priestesses, and these women were highly, highly, highly revered. These women we very much look down upon in today's society, which is a byproduct of centuries of demonizing sex and demonizing women as embodiments of Shakti, of this sensual cosmic energy that flows through the entire universe. But in ancient Babylon, they were not skewed like that and imbalanced like that. They weren't like, God is a man, there is only a male god, and we as men are embodiments of him, so women, they need to be suppressed. No, that's not how they thought at all. That was an Assyrian evolution of cosmology and the pantheons, like where they were like, no, Ashur, that is the only god that exists, that is a male god, and men have a share of the male god, and that is the divine, and women, they have the earth, and they're lowly like animals. That was where that began, okay? That was where the real suppression of women began, and the feminine. Assyria trickled into the Abrahamic religions, and that is where we are today. That is where we are moving. That is what we're moving out of today, okay? But back in Babylon, we had the goddess Ishtar and the god Marduk being worshipped side by side. And every new year, we had the king representing the god, and we had the high priestess representing the goddess, joined together in Hieroskamas, in holy marriage, right, in divine sexual union. Now, this was not for pleasure. This was a highly symbolic, ceremonial, even cosmic act that was meant to facilitate a burgeoning, fertile landscape to benefit the people of Babylon. And the temple women, especially the high priestess, represented Ishtar. So when a man entered the goddess temples to practice Tantra with one of these women, they were actually engaging with a personification of Ishtar. They understood it as the woman embodying Ishtar, right? So when they entered her, they were actually entering the holy temple of Ishtar herself. There was the outer temple, which is also an sort of a symbol of Ishtar, but then there are the individual women who were personifications, who are personifications of Ishtar. So there was a great deal of reverence, right? Ishtar was a goddess that they greatly revered in ancient times. The first empire builder, Sargon the Great, who ruled before Babylon, he was a goddess worshipper, right? He worshipped Ishtar. Ishtar was his patron god, and he of course appointed his daughter as the high priestess, and she's actually the first recorded author that we have. And in Babylon we had Nebuchadnezzar II, I like to call him Nebuchadnezzar II, and he built a massive wall surrounding Babylon that he dedicated to Ishtar. They've actually reconstructed it in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. Unfortunately, the building is under construction, so we won't be able to see it until 2037, unfortunately. I'm quite bummed about that, but anyway. Right, so he was also goddess worshipper, right? All these kings revered the feminine, okay? So far so good. These women were revered in ancient Babylon. So this is just to lay the groundwork for what is going to happen to Helena, okay? It's not enough just to look at the cult in eyes wide shut, in isolation. To understand the cult and what is going to happen to Helena, we have to understand it in relation to where this cult actually derives from. And it is derived from Babylon. So the Old Testament and the Judaic faith is infused with Babylonian cosmology and archetypes. Some of these archetypes are sort of quite well preserved, like Marduk, right? The patriarchal god, right? Because Israel became a patriarchy, so they didn't sort of demonize the male gods, but they certainly demonized the female gods, notably Ishtar. That's why we see all these sort of demonic entities in Hebrew cosmology. They're actually the gods and goddesses of the surrounding nations who were positive archetypes, but then by demonizing them, they actually turned them into demons, and by suppressing them in the collective psyche, they became shadow figures, right? In Kabbalistic terms, they went from sephirotic beings that belong to the tree of life into klipatic beings who belong to the tree beneath the tree of life, the shadow tree. To apply some Jungian terminology, they became shadow gods, shadow deities, what we would call, demons. And so because Ishtar went from being a luciferic, a light-bringing figure, a glorious, beautiful, revered figure, because they took that figure and turned her upside down, right? Lowered her into the underworld, lowered her into the klipatic tree of life, there she became a satanic archetype, right? That's where we see the pentagram go from being upwards pointing to downwards pointing. And we see this with many gods, also with Baal, right? Baal was a fertility god, but then the Israelites turned him into a demon, right? So Ishtar was turned from this beautiful, light-bringing goddess, and she was suppressed in the collective psyche into the underworld, into hell, into the klipatic tree of life. But that's not the figure that she was in ancient Babylon, okay? That's the figure she became in the collective psyche of the Israelites. And they, of course, spread and disseminated the Judeo-Christian values and worldviews, where the feminine is seen as evil, where the sexual instinct is seen as evil, where the goddess is seen as evil. Since we have established that the temple prostitutes in Babylon were personifications of Ishtar in her sort of luciferic, bright, shining, beautiful, positive light, then by inverting this archetype, the priestesses become personifications of this inversion. Does that make sense? Right? You take a positive archetype that is revered and has a real positive influence in the world, then you subvert it, right? You demonize it, you suppress it, you force it down into the unconscious, where it becomes demonic. And then these women who would have been personifications of a very positive archetype, now they become personifications of a dark, destructive archetype. They demonized Ishtar, called her the mother of whores, right? The mother of the priestesses, right? And they saw her as being this destructive, evil archetype. And I guess it's understandable, Ishtar's Babylon did sort of go there and utterly dominate them and then move them to Babylon. So I guess it's understandable that they don't like her that much, but it's very much because of this bitterness that they had of being enslaved by a culture worshipping a goddess. That's what happened, right? They were defeated and disposed from the motherland to Babylon, where they had to work for the king, right? It was still under quite humane conditions, right? They were allowed to live by themselves and still practice their own faith and all that, but they had to work for the Babylonians, right? So obviously they harbored a lot of resentment towards this goddess of this empire who utterly defeated them. So that's the reason why they demonized Ishtar and shunned her into the darkness, where, of course, she developed into something else within the collective psyche of the Israelites, calling her the mother of whores. She's the mother of priestesses, right? But they called them whores, right? Those dirty, dirty women, right? So that's the reason why the temple women, the temple prostitutes in Eyes Wide Shut, are not treated with respect.
Nothing happened to her after you left that party that hadn't happened to her before. She got her brains out. Period. She was a junkie. Do you remember the one with the great tit?
It's because they are personifications of a demonized version of Ishtar. They are, of course, still central figures in the secret society, but they are not revered as the priestesses in Babylon were revered. And of course, the secret society in the story is run by Israelites, right? So it's run by people who went to Babylon and who learned the trades of banking and applied them to exert global dominance. And they also preserved their cosmology, and they also preserved their goddess temples, but of course in an inverted manner. Now, if this pentagram on the Barbie doll box had been turned upwards, it would have evoked Ishtar as the Queen of Heaven, as she was known as in ancient times. But after the subversion of values, as Nietzsche calls the Judeo-Christian values, right? The Judeo-Christian values essentially took the aristocratic values of Babylon, turned them upside down. Because of that, Ishtar went from being a Queen of Heaven to a demoness of the night, right? A Lilith-like figure that tempts men into just spilling their seed and sort of weakening them and bringing them down to a lower state, evoked by the downwards pointing pentagram. And because of this fall of the feminine, right, this inversion of Ishtar and her cult and her priestesses, these women do indeed become seductresses who lead men astray and who sort of move them down into a very, very dark place. And that is the reason why the two women in the beginning of the movie, they want to lure Bill to the end of the rainbow.
Ladies, where exactly are we going?
Where the rainbow ends.
Where the rainbow ends?
Don't you want to go where the rainbow ends?
Well, now that...
But if they were in their preserved and dignified position, it would have been the reverse. They would have been tantric specialists helping men elevate the sexual energy, right? To raise the kundalini up the rainbow of the chakra system to attain higher wisdom, right? Knowledge of good and evil. So that was what Eve was actually trying to do with Adam, yeah? She was actually trying to elevate Adam into a higher state of consciousness where he sees like God, knowing good and evil. Because that is exactly what happens when you elevate the fallen spirit that is sexual energy and you elevate it all the way up into your higher mind. You reach a non-dualistic state of awareness where time is not even a thing anymore, right? Past and future doesn't exist. Masculine and feminine doesn't exist. Or it does exist, but you unify them, yeah? Ida and Pingala rise up together and they join in holy marriage, as symbolized in the caduceus staff of Hermes, right? Which represents the spine. The two serpents represent Ida and Pingala, and the pine cone at the top represent the mind that is opening up to receive spirit, yeah? And that is the Enlightenment experience, and that is the experience of seeing like God, knowing good and evil. But the priesthood, the male priesthood of Israel was not interested in people becoming more enlightened. These women were helping men and other women do that, yeah? They were raising their awareness, raising their energy upwards into a higher level of consciousness. And if there's one thing that the elites do not want, it's a public that are aware and are enlightened. They want to keep us at a low state, preferably beneath the heart chakra, kind of like in these lower 3, lower 2 chakras, so that we never raise ourselves to a higher level, because that way we are easier to control. So they had to demonize Eve, who represents the priestesses of ancient Babylon and ancient Canaan, where Israel lay and where the goddess was worshipped as Asherah and Astarte. And they also had to demonize Ishtar, the mother of whores, in Babylon, where they were kept captive and where their hatred of Babylon and of the goddess, I think, truly originates. So they demonized the goddess, they demonized the priestess in the form of Eve, and made it evil to raise one's consciousness, right? No. You don't get to do that. You need to just read the scripture and only approach the divine through our tightly controlled methods. You can pray, sure, you can, follow the holidays and all that stuff, but you better not actually do some real spiritual sexual alchemy, okay? That is a dirty thing, right? Sex is dirty, that's not something that you should engage in at all. Crowley, he did try to mend this a bit, that's why he had several scarlet women in his thelema. Now these women were representations of Ishtar, as we see in the tarot card Lust in his excellent tarot deck. I'm not a big fan of Crowley, but I gotta admit that deck is absolutely stunning. But basically Crowley was trying to actually mend this divide that the Judeo-Christian values and worldview had created. Was he the perfect guy to do that? No, he wasn't. He became too egoic. Things happened too quickly with him. He didn't complete the Holy Guardian Angel ritual, and I think that sort of opened him up to some very negative influences. But he grew up with a pastor forefather, right? He grew up with a mother who called him a beast, right? She called him the great beast itself. And he was like, you know what? I'll be the great beast. I will be the man who Ishtar is riding, right? So after his mother christened him the great beast, he was like, you know what? Challenge accepted. I take that on. I am the great beast, and these are my scarlet women, or actually scarlet women. He only had one at a time. He had quite a few actually. They're gonna be my Ishtar, and we're gonna do sex magic, and it's gonna be amazing. Unfortunately, he was quite extreme in his methods. I think actually that his goal was noble, but I think the execution was lacking. I think that he became way too egoic, probably because the Golden Dawn that he was initiated in have a lot of sort of solar rites, and if you know any sort of obnoxious Leo, you know that they can be quite annoying, right? And that's basically what the Golden Dawn was creating. They were very much focused on the solar aspect of our nature. So the leaders of the Golden Dawn were sort of like these ego solar men, and Crowley became one of them, and it obviously didn't end so well. But he did try to mend that divide between the Babylonian goddess religion and the Judeo-Christian world we live in, where the Ishtar archetype has been heavily suppressed. So to sum this up, what is going to happen to Helena is she's going to become a seductress. She's going to become a scarlet woman, as represented by this Barbie doll. And she will be found in mansions like Victor's, seducing very prominent men. And because of this inversion of the archetype of Ishtar, she will sort of be an inverted priestess as well, a Lilith-like figure who is luring men into their demise, if you will, into like a lower place, into a darker place. Speaking of Crowley, I don't think that this cult has mended this divide between the original Ishtar cults and the inverted Ishtar cults. I think it's very much an inverted Ishtar cult, and that means that the priestesses are expected to be inverted satanic expressions of the goddess of heaven. And that means that Helena will be trained to become an elite seductress. She's not going to be put like in some dungeon or anything like that. We won't see her like Domino in a little drab apartment. I don't even think that we're going to see her in places like Rainbow Fashions. I think that she's going to become an elite seductress. We will see her in mansion parties like Victor's, and we will see her masked kneeling before a red-garbed priest in one of these mansions, and she will be engaging in purely sort of lower chakra tantra that do not rise beyond the heart, but is very much down here in the lower states. So she won't be put in like a dungeon or anything like that. She won't be mistreated like that, but she will be trained, indoctrinated, who knows, brainwashed into becoming one of these masked priestesses that we see in the mansion. So her future is not exactly the brightest. Will she at some point get to live the life that was sort of indicated by her standing by the baby crib? Maybe later, but by then she will be so deep into this world that she will sadly, I think, be quite corrupted, like Alice is corrupted. And who knows, maybe in the future she will sacrifice her own daughter to the cult, because this is a very elite institution. The priestesses in ancient Babylon were daughters of the elite, just as the priestesses that we see in Eyes Wide Shut are also from the upper class spheres, right? Nuala Windsor.
Do you know Nuala Windsor?
No, and it's very, very lovely to meet you.
Very upper class name. Alice, definitely also upper class, right? She ran a art gallery in New York City. I mean,
I used to manage an art gallery in Soho.
this is only something that the ultra rich engage in. This is like a hobby, a sort of like a vanity project of the very wealthy. And it's not to make profits. It's sort of just, it's for networking. It's for tax purposes. It's for also influencing certain trends. Like, there are some very interesting reasons why the ultra wealthy engage in art. We're not going to get into that here, but basically the priestesses that we meet, Mandy, Alice, they are upper class women, just as Helena is also in the upper echelons of society as well. Not the top of the top, but definitely in the higher end, via her mother specifically. Alice comes from an upper class family, not Bill. So that is the destiny of Helena. She's going to become a neo-Babylonian priestess, a subverted Babylonian priestess. So she will be one of these women who seduce men and tempt men and lead men to the end of the rainbow. What the rainbow is and where the rainbow ends are questions for another video. And with that, thank you for watching. If there are other parts of the movie that you would like to see us break down, then let us know down below. We do listen to you guys, and we love your theories, we love engaging with you. And yeah, thank you so much for watching the 5 other videos on the channel on Eyes Wide Shut. You have helped out the channel massively. Thank you so much. This is just the beginning. Many more Eyes Wide Shut videos to come, many more other series to come. This is just the beginning. Take care, guys, and until next time.